All right, so this is sort of like a kind of keep track segment as we hear more and more about the people that knew and were involved in exactly what the plan was between the November 2020 election and January 6th, the day of the Trump riots, to try to steal the election from the guy who really won it, Joe Biden, and hand it over to Donald Trump in some kind of a, you can use the term coup or insurrection or whatever term you want to use. Every time we hear from another one of these Trump insiders, we realize it was much more premeditated than initially was believed. Although there's no question that, I mean, listen, if for the 6 months leading up to the election, they're basically telling us we're going to say the votes were invalid, we're going to say that it was all fraudulent, et cetera. If they tell you that for 6 months, you should believe that that's what they're going to do. And that's exactly what they did. But there is an incredible new article in the Daily Beast that now outlines Trump economic advisor Peter Navarro in an interview, straight up telling them what the plan was and how he coordinated with Steven Bannon. Read the entire article. We're going to take a look at it. The article in the Daily Beast is called Trump Advisor Peter Navarro Lays Out How He and Bannon Planned to Overturn Biden's Electoral Win. And it's exactly what we believed and even worse. A former Trump White House official says he and right-wing provocateur Steve Bannon were behind the last-ditch effort to try to stop the certification of the 2020 election results and keep Trump in power. They even had a name for the plan called the Green Bay Sweep. In his recently published memoir, Peter Navarro, Trump's trade advisor, explains how he stayed in contact with Bannon as they put the Green Bay Sweep in motion with help from members of Congress loyal to the cause. But in an interview last week with the Daily Beast, Navarro shed additional light on his role and their coordination with politicians like Paul Gosar and Senator Ted Cruz. Quote, "We spent a lot of time lining up over 100 congressmen, including some senators. It started out perfectly. At 1 p.m., Gosar and Cruz did exactly what was expected of them. It was a perfect plan. It all predicated on peace and calm on Capitol Hill. We didn't even need protesters because we had over 100 congressmen committed to it." That commitment appeared as Congress was certifying the votes, you'll remember. Senator Cruz signed off on Gosar's official objection to counting Arizona's electoral ballots. Remember that there's this, this was an issue back in 2000 with Al Gore and George W. Bush in that election as well. The way that these objections work are that a member of the House rises an objection, and then they are asked, do you have the support of a member of the Senate? And typically the answer is no. In this case, Cruz was the Senate guy who was going to sign on to that. Staffers for Cruz and Gosar did not respond for requests for comment. There's no public indication whether the January 6th committee wants testimony or documents from Cruz or Gosar, but they've only started to seek evidence. The last-minute maneuvering never had any chance of actually decertifying the election results on its own, a point that Navarro quickly acknowledges. But their hope was to run the clock as long as possible, to increase pressure on Mike Pence, to send electoral votes back to 6 contested states. Now, understand that every time we learn more about the plan, it's the same story that we are hearing. Now that we have the memo that was written by Eastman, the lawyer Eastman, and presented to the White House about how this all could work, one of the big 3 points that was made was make it so that we put pressure on Pence to either reject the electoral ballots from certain states, or even better, even more directly, even more aggressively, you could say, seat an alternative slate of electors. What they wanted Pence to do, and of course, most legal experts say Pence couldn't actually do this. What they wanted Pence to do was say, you know, in these different states, Arizona, I don't remember the full list, but it was like Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, maybe Nevada. They wanted Pence to say, well, you know what? We can't trust these numbers. And so instead of allowing the Democratic electors to vote because the Democratic candidate won the state, I am going to bring in an alternative slate of Republican electors who will cast their votes for Trump instead of Joe Biden. That was one idea. Pence couldn't really do that. The other idea that they floated was, okay, you don't bring an alternative slate of electors, but you say, because it's unclear who really won some of these states, we're just going to take those electors off the table. And what that does is it makes it so that the threshold for winning, instead of being 270 electoral votes, is some lower number, ideally a lower number, which Donald Trump did have. That was the other idea. So when we look at this article, we realize this is part of that same plan. It was all coordinated. The legal opinions that Trump had in front of him and the idea of putting Pence in a position to take action, it's the same thing that Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon were working on. What else do we have here? The Green Bay sweep was very well thought out. It was designed to get us 24 hours of televised hearings, but we thought that we could bypass the corporate media by getting this stuff televised. Navarro's part in the ploy was to provide the raw materials. That came in the form of a 3-part White House report called The Immaculate Deception and the Art of the Steal. My role was to provide the receipts for the 100 congressmen or so who would make their cases, who could rely in part on the body of evidence I'd collected to lay the legal predicate for the actions to be taken. And the article points out, ultimately, states have not found any evidence of electoral fraud above the norm, which is exceedingly small. I think it was it Wisconsin or Georgia that found, I think, 4 dead people voted, and I think 3 of them just died after submitting their votes. We're talking about numbers like that. The next phase was up to Bannon, Navarro describes in his memoir. Steve Bannon's role was to figure out how to use this information, what he called the receipts, to overturn the election result. That's how Steve came up with the Green Bay sweep idea. The political and legal beauty of the strategy was this. By law, both the House and Senate must spend up to 2 hours of debate per state on each challenge. For the 6 battleground states, that would be as much as 24 hours of televised hearings. So that was the idea. Now, according to this plan, you can argue that the violence hurt the plan. And what I mean by that is part of the reason why the hearings didn't happen and you didn't have 24 hours, because remember, the day that 100,000 of you it was actually about 1.3 million different people joined my coverage of the January 6th Trump riots. My expectation on that day was that we were going to see objection after objection after objection, each with 2 hours of debate, and that I would step away from the coverage and we would just stream the coverage, and it was going to go into the night, 24 hours, maybe even 30 hours, we were thinking. The reason it didn't happen is because of the riots. And so one could make the case that this plan, although it wasn't going to work to steal the election, that this plan was derailed by the fact that the riots took place. Now, that would lead us to the question, well, then why would Trump incite the riots? Trump has an all of the above approach. Trump doesn't have the sophistication and the ability for abstract thinking to realize, well, this plan and the riot inciting could end up conflicting and causing a problem. Trump's idea is just do everything, do this and try to convince Pence and then, cause chaos. And ultimately, because the debate stopped because of the risk, the physical risk of violence to members of the House and Senate, this ended up not happening. Now, this ultimately wasn't going to work, but it might have actually gotten them those 24 hours of TV coverage that they wanted. So again, it's all out in the open. They're admitting that this was the plan to steal an election that they did not actually win. Science has shown us that lowering your body temperature at night helps you sleep. I can't sleep in a hot room. That's why I love our sponsor, Chili Sleep, which makes customizable climate-controlled sleep solutions to sleep better. Their flagship products are the Uller sleep system and the Cube sleep system, which is what I have. Both are hydro-powered, temperature-controlled luxury mattress pads. You can make them as cold as 55 degrees Fahrenheit. If you wanted, you could go as hot as 115 degrees. I like the cooler option. I keep mine at 60 degrees, and it gives me a great cool night of sleep. No feeling hot, no more sweating. I'm falling asleep faster, and it pairs perfectly with Chili Sleep's weighted Chili blanket,
which keeps you cold on top too.
Right now, Chili Sleep is running a special sale. You'll get 30% off everything when you go to chilisleep.com/Pacman. The link is right underneath this video.